Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome everybody. First of all, I apologize that we are about 2 to 3 minutes late. We were running a quick check from our side. My name is Gunja, and I work at edForce for almost 3 years now. I'm present here with Mohit, whose introduction I'll give it to you in a few minutes. Just allow me a few minutes, please. I'm here to kick off today's edTalk, and edTalks are a signature series of interactive expert-led sessions from edForce, your partner in workforce upskilling and learning. Today's topic on which we are doing our edTalk is Persuade with impactful presentations, and I assure you that we are going to create some interesting slides, not just for engagement, not just for decoration, but a lot more. So over the next 90 minutes, you will exactly see how we are going to transform your ordinary decks into some powerful storytelling tools. Before we begin the ed talk, I will just give you a quick, thriller that if you stay till the end of the session with us, you will receive an Amazon voucher. But I'm going to disclose the details only if you stay till the end. So please stick around for the question and answer session with Mohit. Thank you. And let me now welcome our speaker, Mohit. He is a slide design strategist, he's a communication coach, and he nearly has 2 decades of experience. His hands on approach has helped leaders across all the levels to turn their slides into something persuasive, into some actionable narratives. So today's session will be led by him. I'm going to be around. Over to you, Mohit.
Thank you, Guncha. Thank you so much. It also tells us, how long I've known Guncha. The first line should read over 2.5 decades. Now I'm past the 25-year mark, and the
Oh,
yeah. So that's
I will
absolutely
change
fine.
that.
Give me a second to start sharing my screen,
Sure.
and you can see my screen.
Yes.
Perfect. So a very warm welcome from my side as well. I'm going to start at a very unfamiliar, at a very different place. A place which was very known to us, almost like the lockdown, but about 400 years ago. 400 years ago, Sir Isaac Newton was also in a lockdown. Uh, London was battling the Black Plague, and it was at that time Sir Isaac Newton did some of his best work. And during that time, he wrote this wonderful letter to a dear friend of his called Sir Robert Hooke. In the letter, he said, "If I have seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants." And that's exactly what the next 90 minutes is going to be all about. I will borrow from behavioral economics, I will borrow from psychology, of course, we will borrow from design. So everything that I tell you is foundationed in hardcore science. There are no whims and fancies that I will address here. We will talk about science completely. So, what do I intend to cover with you over the next 90 minutes or so? First things first, what is wrong with the way we present at the corporate world today? We'll try and get to the root cause of the problem, really diagnose the issue, and then understand a presentation is more than just slides. So we'll look at what the ecosystem of presentations is all about. And finally, I'll give you some principles of design. And when we're talking of that, we will also give you live examples of how you can apply those principles to take what we often call text heavy or busy slides and turn them into something that is visually engaging and compelling for the audience to pay attention. I'm sure you have lots of expectations. As a matter of fact, we asked for you to send us your slides. Some of you did. You will see that live transform today. However, if you have any other expectation, I'd love you to type that in the chat window. And by the time we end the 90 minutes, we will ensure that your expectation, and if you don't have one, it'll be great if you let me know what your challenge is. And we'll be happy to kind of even maybe wiggle away from what we intended to cover and attack and address your expectation and or challenge. My expectation is absolutely simple. While this is a webinar, there is still a way we can have a conversation. So I'd really like you to, keep popping those questions in the chat. Guncha is going to help me curate those, and I will ensure that we address all of them either on this platform today or later in some way or the other. There's definitely one request I have of all of you. Please get yourself a notepad and pen. There might be chances that I'll just pop a name of a book or a podcast. And many times when you don't capture them, it kind of vaporizes into the etherware. So, on that note, let's jump right in and let's try and figure out what is wrong with the way we're doing presentations today. And I think the best way to look at it is to see an example. This is a slide that was made by Boeing, uh, being presented to the committee that was deciding whether or not to allow the re entry of the space shuttle, the Columbia space shuttle, back in. And obviously, as a consequence of which, they allowed the space shuttle in. And then we all know what happened. So, really, in the true sense of the word, this slide is accused of murder. And these are the 7 people it killed. And I'm not saying this. It is an extremely well documented piece of evidence in the Columbia Investigation Accident Board report. If you jump to page 191 of the report, which by the way is still live on the NASA website, you will see a very scathing analysis of what's wrong with the way we do presentations. While this slide is symptomatic of the way we do presentations, it teaches us more than one thing. Now, let's quickly look back at the slide. There are two things very, very wrong with the way the slide is. Of course, it is text heavy. It's got a lot of important information buried under points of subpoints. But there are two very important things that are wrong with this. Number one, it uses extremely unspecific or fuzzy language. The slide has the use of the word significant 5 times. Significant is almost like beauty, it lies in the eye of the beholder. I have been battling weight all my life. For me, 2 flights of stairs is on some days significant exercise. For any one of you who runs a marathon, that's a joke. So we've got to get away from using words that really have no specificity built into them. End of day, as soon as possible, ASAP, EOD, all these are a-specific when it comes to communication. And good communication thrives in specificity. Let's look at the more important dimension of what's wrong with the slide. The most important dimension, the most important piece of information is buried right at the end. And no wonder the people who were going through it were kind of exhausted by the time they got to the end, and it just slipped past them. Therefore, presentations can actually kill. And this is so ironic and tragic because we do almost millions of presentations every day. 2011 is when Microsoft did this study. It's been over a decade and a half that they haven't tried to even relook at it. And in 2011, they established that every second of every day, 350 presentations are delivered. Now, that's 2011. We are sitting in 2025. We are way past the pandemic, which actually gave a huge rise to the use of PowerPoint. And then there is Canva upon us. So more presentations are being made on mobile phones and tablets than they are being made on PCs. The other dimension of the tragedy is that today presentations are being delivered by everyone. Students are doing it. I mean, for me, the most insightful or harrowing example of presentations being there everywhere was when my son in class 5 started to make presentations. To what effect? For what? We weren't quite sure, but he was introduced to the world of PowerPoint as early as class 5. The most powerful men in the world are making it, politicians are making it, industrialists are making it, product launches, and it's happening everywhere from boardrooms to classrooms to, you go to a conference. When you're invited to a conference to speak, it's almost like an expectation that you will bring a deck with you. And I would not be wrong to say that a vast majority of these presentations are boring. You know what? I'm actually making an understatement when I say they're boring. They're not boring, they are pathetic. So much so that we have a phrase to define it. We call it death by PowerPoint. Now, interestingly, we don't accept mediocrity in any dimension of our life. Not in the food we eat, not in the clothes we wear, not in the shoes we purchase. Why then are we so laid back when it comes to bad presentations? Interestingly, each one of you out there has an answer, but it's just that you haven't thought about it. And that's where I'd really want you to pause and think. What do I want you to think? Very simple. I want you to imagine that you're sitting in a room and you're attending the best presentation of your life. Tell me, what would be the things that would make it the most amazing presentation? But while you're thinking about the best, also tell me what would make the worst presentation, a presentation that you have almost kind of slept through. And I'm sure each one of you has been through that situation. So take a few seconds of downtime, think about it. Please write your responses in the chat window. We're doing a little bit of a dipstick survey right now. We're trying to understand from you what is your experience as a member of the audience on experiencing the best presentation that you've ever seen and the worst presentation. And while you write your experience, tell us why you liked the one that you liked and why you hated the one that you hated. So it's almost like I'm asking you, what are the characteristics of the best presentation and the worst presentation according to you? So I'm going to be silent for the next 30 to 45 seconds and I'll wait for you to type in, right? So blue text over a dark blue background, that is almost like a favorite, right? No color contrast. Best is a standing ovation strikes a chord. So, Prashant, what you're trying to say is that it was extremely audience appropriate, right? The audience resonated with it. Ankita says, I hated, okay, yeah. Worst is you don't remember you slept through. Yeah. You know, presentations are a far better sleeping pill than sleeping pills. Best is focus. So you liked it because it kept your focus and interest. Cluttered text, no clear messaging. The best I saw was done by NASA, by George Bershin, talking about education and soft skills needed today. Uh, Chen, was that a recorded presentation or were you there live? I'd really like to know that. Best sticky message data highlights, so which means meaningful. Prakash says, I love to hear stories and anecdotes. Combo of images, insights, engaging, not the PowerPoint. Reading of slides, less words, more visuals, the best you can connect one. So lovely responses. The best ones usually are interactive, and the worst presentations are the one where the speaker is just going on and on and on, and more like a monologue. Imagine in a webinar, you expect it to be a dialogue and not a monologue. I love that. All right. Uh, as I was online, it was done live. Excellent. So it was a live presentation. Worst, no visual representation. Excellent. You know what? I've been able to preempt all of this. Let me show you what's the sum and substance of everything that you have written here. And that's how predictable most audiences are, right? You talk about, oh, 6 by Ashwarya, I will definitely talk about the 6 by 6 rule, and you realize how outdated and dysfunctional it is right now. And that's a lovely point you've brought about. Let me show you the summary of the best and the worst presentations according to you, right? So the reader was the speaker was reading the slides. There was no eye contact, right? The speaker, the slide design, blue text on a blue background, bad color choices. It's almost as if I could predict the summary of the responses that you were going to give me. And the reason is that we've been doing a survey for many years now. And turns out it's exactly the same things that pop up every year, year after year. The presenter reading their slides is the top irritant every year. But let's look at something very interesting. Let's not focus on what you said. Let's focus on the things that you did not say. And for that, we'll have to change the view of the way we are looking at this data. Now, we know intuitively that any effective presentation will have three pillars. It'll have the pillar of the story. Somebody said that very beautifully. I love to hear stories. It'll have a pillar of slide design. You talked about slide design. It'll also have a pillar of speaking, how the presenter is articulating or how the presenter is connecting. None of you talked about that. None of you talked about accent. None of you mentioned anything to do with body language. And that's exactly what good and bad presentations are about. Good presentations are the ones where there's a lot of preparation. Now, everything that you see highlighted on your slide is about preparation. It takes lots of time to get to the right visual. It takes lots of times to get to the right metaphor, to explain to your audience what you really need to explain to them. It's lots of effort to find the right color choices. As a matter of fact, that effort has to be bulwarked by understanding how color theory works. So, really, it's not death by PowerPoint. You've got to understand that a vast majority of the success of any speech or presentation is foundationed on preparation. Why? Because you have to understand your audience is extremely selfish. You don't care about who I am. You're not here to listen to me today. You're here to listen to learn how you can make impact through PowerPoint presentations. I could be a joker off the street. As long as I'm able to tell you what you wish to learn, you will love this presentation. So your audience is extremely selfish. The one thing that they're tuned into, what's in it for me? But what's very nice about the audience is they're also very forgiving. If they've been able to take away from the presentation what they've come for, they will disregard a few mistakes here and there. So it's not death by PowerPoint at all. It's death by ignorance. We're ignorant about the fact that our audience are benevolent. They don't expect perfection, they expect clarity. If the message is clear, you will be forgiven. However, as presenters, we fall into this huge trap of wanting to have the perfect slides, not wanting to fumble at all. As a matter of fact, it's absolutely fine to fumble here and there, maybe stutter once in a while. Your audience is forgiving, but never lose sight of the fact that your audience expect utmost clarity. So I'm now going to jump to the second chapter. Now that we know that we're focusing on all the wrong things when it comes to success for a corporate presentation, what then really means is what do we focus on? And for that, we've got to really understand what the presentation ecosystem is all about. So let me give you a glimpse of the presentation ecosystem. It's made up of three simple things. Number one, where are you presenting? Right? So there are simply two venues or two conferences or two rooms where you can present. Number one is a conference room, right? So while this is not a conference room, I'm sitting in my studio, you're sitting maybe in your home or your workstation, but it has all the trappings of a conference room. The second is a boardroom. We, more often than not, present in a boardroom rather than a conference room. But here's the tragedy. That's another tragedy, by the way. All presentations that are recorded are really conference room environments rather than boardroom environments. I'm also going to play some videos for you, all of them from conference rooms. But then I will ask you and request you to focus on only one dimension, the dimension that's applicable to a boardroom presentation. But before we get there, let's understand what are the differences between a conference room and a boardroom presentation. Very simple. The purpose of a boardroom presentation invariably is to persuade, is to convince your audience to vote or go in your favor. You could be making a sale, you could be in a review presentation, you want your audience to favor you. However, in a conference room, the idea is to inform, maybe sometimes entertain. So it's almost like a shoot and scoot. What does that do to the way information flows? In a boardroom, you like it or you don't, the information will be a two-way, which means your audience will interrupt you. They will ask you questions. You might not want to answer it right away, but they will have points that they want to throw at you, maybe even contribute to the message that you're trying to communicate. However, the information flow in a conference room is always one way. A political rally, despite the fact that does not happen inside of a room, has all the trappings of a conference room. Uh, the stage is erected in such a manner that it's virtually impossible for the audience to speak to the speaker. You know, it's very similar here as well. Even if you want to kind of unmute and speak, the technology does not allow you to communicate with me through voice. You have to rely on the written word. So, to a large extent, this one way is also kind of handicapped against you. And last but not the least is how you deliver. Now, basis these two dimensions of purpose and information flow, the delivery orientation changes. What that means is when you're in a conference room, it's almost like a performance that you're delivering. It's exactly like a play. There are some places where you will get the opportunity to flex here or there, but it's largely scripted. In a boardroom presentation, it will always be a conversation. So you cannot put on a persona. And then there is the one which is what we are kind of in today, really, which is the makings of both a boardroom and a conference room, and that's a classroom. So remember, you're hopefully going to be in more boardroom presentations than in conference room presentations. So when you're going for a sales pitch, it's always a boardroom presentation, which means it will be a conversation. Let's now understand how presentations are delivered. Now, presentations are usually sent as an attachment in an email, or they are presented like I'm doing it right now. When you use PowerPoint or any other slide making software to send a presentation via email, you may call it what you may, but it has all the characteristics of a document. Now, what's a document? As opposed to like the presentation that I'm using to aid me in my conversation with you. That is what we call a slide deck. So please remember, you've got to understand whether you're creating a document or you're creating a slide deck. Now let's look at how they differ from each other. Now, the moment I send you my presentation, or rather my slide deck as a PDF, I will not be in that room to guide you through that presentation, which means a document is self guided. An amazing example of what a good document is a contract. A contract is usually drafted by a lawyer, signed by two different signatories, and God forbid if it goes into litigation, it's fought over by another bunch of people. Why? Because the document itself, the contract, which is that document, is self contained. So its consumption is self guided. And therefore, that nature of the document calls for it to be exhaustive. However, a slide deck, you talked about it. I'm not saying this. You said we want a slide deck that's visual in nature, right? That has just a little bit of text and a big picture. And that's exactly what determines the design orientation of a slide deck. A slide deck has to be sparse, just a couple of words here or there, and largely a visual. And then if there are more words, they've got to come one after the other, what PowerPoint calls animation. Let me show you a couple of examples. What you see on your screen are two pages from a workbook where we use the metaphor to say that information is like food. When these same pages are converted into a slide, it looks something like this. Now you will see, while the headers have been retained, all the text has been stripped away. And that's largely because the medium of communication. A document is self-contained, whereas this slide that you see on your screen is something that will aid my conversation with you, which means all the English or all the language that was written on that page has been stripped away and I will speak that. Again, this is a page from a book. And if that same page has to be converted into a slide, it looks something like this. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, remember, a slide is not your presentation. And you have to understand that you're making a document or you're making a slide. And that's the good part of it. PowerPoint as a software is so versatile that it allows you to create visual documents, and lovely slides. Therefore, blaming PowerPoint for our inadequacies of presentations is a bit of a extension of logic. Last but not the least, is let's understand what really is a presentation. Now, despite the fact that you and I can't really talk one on one, I'm still trying to strike a conversation with you through the written medium. In effect, and you saw that just a little while ago, specifically, even with boardroom presentations, it's almost like an unwritten rule that a good presentation is a bunch of conversations that one individual is having with many individuals at the same time. Now, what does that mean? That means that this tonality and content has to be driven by the person who's presenting. However, the big expectation these days is that the conversation that we have, especially in boardrooms, even when you're making a sales pitch, has to have elements of video and data. One of you talked about graphs being meaningful, and of course there are images. You talked about slides being visually engaging. All of this, in a simple word, is multimedia. So the expectation is that your conversation with me, when it's aided by a PowerPoint slide deck, has to have multimedia. And if I combine the two, that's exactly what a good presentation is. It is nothing but a multimedia enabled dialogue. So I'm going to come into this room, have a conversation with you, and my conversation becomes richer when there are visuals that support it. Now, what's so amazing is that people as early as 2,500 years ago knew exactly what they were talking about. So the first guru of effective public speaking was a man called Aristotle. It's very interesting that India has a relationship with him as well, although fairly stretched and indirect. Aristotle was the teacher of Alexander. So Aristotle, 2,500 years ago, said that effective public speaking is foundationed on five appeals, three of them direct and two indirect. Interestingly, you talked about the two, and I will talk about the other two as well. So, what are the direct appeals? He said for any speech to be effective, it needs three components. First component being logos or logical appeal. Whatever you're saying must make logical sense to me, and it must have a logical flow to it. If you break either the flow or the logic, I will stop listening. The second, he said, was ethical appeal. Now, ethical appeal, translating to today's English, is nothing but credibility. The obvious question is, why should I listen to you? And that is something that doesn't reside in the presenter, it resides in the heads of the listeners. So you could look at me as somebody who's extremely credible when it comes to designing slides, but I have no credibility in helping you figure out what's the root cause of your toothache. For that, you would need somebody else. My family might feel that I'm great when it comes to helping them with home remedies for a lot of ailments, but I can't set up shop just on credibility in their head. So credibility resides in the listeners rather than the speaker. And last but not the least, Aristotle said, for any speech to really be enduring and impactful, has to have pathos or emotion driven by the presenter, by the speaker, and emotion ignited in the audience. That's why humor always is this amazing glue that can bind the people with the speaker. One of you talked about the fact that I was engaged in the conversation that I was having, and that's largely because the content was appropriate and there was that sense of engagement that was delivered through an emotional connection. That's why stories work amazingly well. And 2,500 years ago, Aristotle said that it's at the cusp of a logos, ethos, and pathos that sits a persuasive speech. Now, I don't want you to believe me. I want you to watch this incredible demonstration of all of these three things at work. Now, this is the Oscar acceptance speech of Matthew McConaughey. He's accepting the Best Actors Oscar for a film called Dallas Buyers Club. And you will see him demonstrate all three. You will see him demonstrate amazing credibility, despite the fact that he's got professional credibility. Uh, he's winning the Best Actor. You will see him use oodles of humor, and you'll see a clear logical structure emerge, and we'll discuss it through chat when you watch it. So watch this, but I just might have missed sharing sound. Let's check if it's loud and clear. Can you hear me? The audio that is?
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you to the Academy for this,
Yes, Mohit.
all 6,000 members. Thank you to the other nominees. All these performances were impeccable, in my opinion. I didn't see a false note anywhere. I want to thank.
Okay, so Vasu says the sound is low. Let me check. Give me a second.
Thank you.
Is it better now?
Thank you to the Academy for this. All 6,000 members, thank you to the other nominees. All these performances were impeccable. In my opinion, I didn't see a false note anywhere. I want to thank Jean-Marc Vallée, our director. I want to thank Jed Leto, Jennifer Garner, for work with Daily.
Mohit, the sound is off. The video sound is off. Mohit, we can't hear you as well.
I said it just got blacked out in terms of it's not highlighted. I don't seem to be allowed to share sound. Can you just see if there are any settings that you have to change?
Let me check, Mohit.
It's not activated. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sonia, thank you so much. I think we will skip it, and Sonia's been kind enough to share the YouTube link. So maybe you could watch it as part of the YouTube thing, and let me go on without wasting too much time on setting technology right, because as Murphy's law stays, the slice will always fall on the buttered side. So coming back, when you watch this post haste, now it will be easier for you to connect. Matthew McConaughey comes on stage and he credits everybody who was nominated other than him. So it's almost like going into the market and giving credit to your competitors as well. And he got a huge amount of positive press for that, further strengthened his credibility. He has a clear story structure when he is coming and communicating. He first talks about how God has been kind to him, and then he talks about the credit that he gives to his family, and finally he talks about himself. So very nicely, in a tiered way, he breaks his speech down into three parts, which is first thanking God, then thanking the support from his family, including his dad who's no more, and lastly he talks about his own struggles and effort. So clear logical structure, lots of credibility, and of course when you watch it you will thoroughly enjoy it. I've seen it almost like I know that's a bit of an exaggeration, but almost like a million times, and every time I watch it there is a smile on my face because of the way he uses humor. But the big lesson for us is that in the last 2,500 years nothing seems to have changed. So my screen sharing is turned on, right?
Yes, Mohit.
For some reason, I couldn't see my screen being shared. I'm so sorry. Perfect. Yeah. So for the last 2,500 years, nothing seems to have changed. As marketers, we've only given new names to old concepts. Logos today is called story. That's it. So we have a new word in the world of presentations. We call it story. Ethos, or your credibility, is now the design of your slides. Why? Because even before you've uttered your first word, your slides travel. So design adds to your credibility. And pathos, which is emotion, is expressed through delivery. So therefore, an impactful presentation today is delivered when you are able to bring together a combination of story, design, and delivery. Therefore, you have to understand your slide deck is one part of this entire ecosystem. A good slide deck without a compelling story is as useless as amazing delivery and amazing design, but you don't have an audience. Therefore, I hate it when people say presentations are an art, public speaking is an art. No, it's not. It's a multidisciplinary skill. You've got to understand how story works. You've got to understand how the principles of design work. And then you've got to be able to translate them into slides using the software PowerPoint, which is, of course, the most common. And then, last but not the least, you've got to understand delivery when you're in the room with people. And now there's an added element of complexity with virtual delivery happening. Where do I place the camera? How do I get the lighting turned on? How do I ensure my background contrasts me from my foreground? And all of that are very simple pieces of science. And when we converge them, that's when we are able to deliver an effective presentation. Now, we don't have time to talk about story and delivery and a virtual setup, but we'll definitely talk about the principles of slide design. So let's jump into that. And of course, if you have any questions uh, till here, I'd like you to address those. So you could pop in your questions, but let's start to understand how design really works. You know, an amazing example of the power of design was demonstrated to us a few years ago on the Oscar stage again. The best picture had to be announced, and Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway came on stage. Warren Beatty took out an envelope that looked strikingly like this, and he read out the wrong name. Interestingly, he didn't read out the name, Faye Dunaway did, but this was the envelope that they saw. This is the envelope that we used to really create what emerged from the envelope that Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty had. Now let's look at the big problems with this design. Very badly designed. You're standing on Oscar stage. You're giving the Oscar for the best film. You obviously have the wrong card in your hand, which is the best actress card. And Oscar's word is the largest. Then the problem begins from the next piece of information. Emma Stone and La La Land, the best actress award, is exactly in the same size and in the same font. And the category for which she has won is right at the bottom. So if you look carefully, you will see symptoms of the Boeing slide being kind of transposed in a less wordy best actress card. And as luck would have it, they called out La La Land as the best picture, even though the best picture was some other film. However, this problem could have been sorted if they had a good designer on roll, because the good designer would have made a card that would look like this. Now, the moment I look at the card, I can see this is not an award for the best picture, but an award for the best actress. And therefore, there's virtually no way confusion would have happened. However, we've lost the timeless wisdom that Thomas Watson gave us, that good design is good business. And that's largely because many of us have forgotten what really is design. Most of us think that when you look, okay, let me ask you this question. Try and answer this question for me in the chat window. What, according to you, is design? Just write a one-line definition of design for me. And while you write that definition, don't link your definition with slide design, right? I want the definition of the word design. So your definition should therefore apply to interior design, fashion design, graphic design, architecture, which is also a form of design, industrial design, service design. Let's see what it is. Layout and look, natural and comfortable, ease of use, structure, a way to convey information which is easily decipherable by people, aesthetics blended in logic. That is very philosophical. Design is something which catches your eye, thoughts brought into actions. Design is how you make something work well and look good. Bhavna, you're very close. Design is one place of truth for requirements breakdown. Shivanna, that's really philosophical and deep. It's a visual presentation of planning and process, articulate. So there's so much abstraction I see and so much philosophy I see in the concept. right? For many of us, design is something that looks beautiful, catches the eye. That's so grossly incorrect. Kudos to Bhavna, she got it bang on. Design is a marriage of utility and beauty, things that work well and things that look good. We, in the world of information design, because that's exactly what PowerPoint carries, a PowerPoint slide is a carrier of information. In the world of information design, we have to give more importance to utility than to beauty. Therefore, Steve Jobs was absolutely right when he said design is not how it looks, design is how it works. So when you've created a slide and when you send it to us, say, Mohit, can you design it for us? We are not designing your slide, we are decorating it. Because design, by the virtue of the way it is defined, is a combination of functionality and beauty. And you just can't add beauty after you've cluttered a slide with lots and lots of text. So there are various rules, but I will cover with you the four most important ones. The first rule is what we call contrast. Now, what's contrast? Contrast is you use differences in certain attributes to catch the attention of your audience. Now, the moment you look at this, you see a grid of squares. But here, the one piece of information that catches your attention almost instantaneously is the triangle. Why? Because it's different in shape. You can create these differences through a variety of techniques: shape, color, size, a box around it, what we call enclosure. Now, these are called pre-attentive attributes. Now, what's a pre-attentive attribute? A pre-attentive attribute is something that your brain is hardwired to instantly pay attention to. You don't really need to exert too much cognitive effort, too much processing from your brain to make sense of it. Now, let me show you how you can use contrast for our advantage when it comes to slides. Now, this is a very typical cover slide. You will see it has a black band at the bottom and at the top. That's largely because the aspect ratio has been distorted. And it's a big disservice that you're doing to yourself, because if I were to shift this towards the top, you see this white band at the bottom now is almost as large as 13% of the size of the screen, right? And there's this dimension of Superman that they want to kind of highlight with the S being double. So we say Superman. Similarly, we've got a table that we usually copy and paste from Excel, and we distort the aspect ratio of the image as well. Now, if you'll focus closely, you will see that the Q's and the zeros and the O's are distorted. Actually, this is the right proportion. Now, another thing which is a dimension of utility that is completely disregarded in this slide is all the quarter-wise gross figures are on one side and the growth is on the other. But as a reader, I want to see the figures of the quarter and the growth adjacent so I can see how is growth happening. Therefore, the table is great when it comes out of Excel, but is not a good idea to use that when it comes to PowerPoint. This is a much better representation of the same table. And then you add a layer of contrast, instantly your audience is focusing on that number. You could do it for even simple tables, right? Let me show you another example. Here, there's a list of companies, but now you know which company to focus on, right? Very quick test. What was the name of the last company on the previous slide? Fire away your answers in the chat window. No, Chen. NAS was the company's name that I had highlighted. The last company in the didn't pay attention. Yes, Worley Parsons. A large number of you did not pay attention because I did not allow you to do that. Why? I drove your attention towards NAS cooperation and contracting. So remember, contrast is almost like a spotlight. It creates a focal point on the slide, and you're driving the attention of your audience to that one focal point. The second rule of good design is repetition. Now, what is repetition? Repeat the visual elements to create a sense of consistency. We really die for something that is novel. That's the exact antithesis of good branding. Good branding, good messaging is foundationed on repetition. What do you repeat? You repeat all the design elements. You repeat the fonts, the colors, the spacing, the styling of the images, the icons, everything. Now, let me show you a couple examples of how repetition can actually help you guide your audience in a presentation. We've got a very simple agenda slide. If we were to make this visual, it looks something like this. And this is where I add contrast on top of repetition to almost create a flow structure. Now, this is my first slide where I introduce the agenda, but I use that same slide as a breaker slide with contrast for my story to move forward. So here it's the first chapter, then the slide comes back, second chapter, third chapter, fourth, and finally I conclude. Repetition doesn't hurt at all. As a matter of fact, it creates engagement and it creates a sense of motion. Again, repetition has to be used not just for design elements, but also the way you're writing your slides. Now, more often than not, we start to create slides that we think look pretty, but they're not as utilitarian. Now, you see the slide on your screen's got 4 points. Two triangles seem to be pointing upwards, the other two pointing downwards. Anything that points downwards is usually seen as negative. That's why even for numbers, we say, oh, the company is going south. So we created a diagram or an infographic that gives equal importance to all the 4 points in question. And we have something that looks like this. But it's still not clear and clean because you see the first box has 3 lines as opposed to the last one, which has only 2. So we want to create a sense of repetition in the title space usage as well. Also, the way we write slides. The first word of every slide must be the same part of speech. So if the first word is a noun, all the remaining first words must be nouns. Adjectives, adjectives. Here we've got verbs that don't really work. So we do a little bit of rewriting and we get a slide that looks like this. So create, garner, strengthen, and build. And then when we add contrast, that's the key takeaway. Also, remember, good slide design is a marriage of utility and beauty. And beauty happens when you use visuals that amplify the message that you're trying to deliver. Therefore, using any arbitrary visual for text that, wants to create a meaning doesn't really work. So here, the person in question is trying to talk about an agenda. And therefore, an agenda is nothing but a journey that you are taking your audience on in a presentation. This is a far better rendition for that same slide. So that's what we will cover in our session today. You could align it like this, which is central alignment, or you could align it like this. Both of them are absolutely right. So remember, repeat everything, not just on a slide, across your slide deck. I'm sure you would have noticed by now that there's a certain styling of icons that we are using, and it's consistently being used across the slide deck. Then comes to what we call, so what does repetition help us achieve? Repetition does the most important job. It adds amazingly to your credibility. Why? Because the moment things are consistent, they're visually similar, as a member of the audience, I'm instantly jumping to the conclusion that it's not a copy paste job. Therefore, if you've copied from another presentation or from a PDF file, it's a great idea to recreate it using your fonts, your colors, and your icons. The third rule that I will cover is called alignment. Now, what's alignment? It's very simple. Everything on a slide has to be placed deliberately. Now, there's a simple reason for that. And that reason is that there is nothing in nature that is natural. So nothing in nature that is physical and is perfectly straight. A bamboo comes close, but it's also not perfectly straight. So when you place items deliberately on a slide that are connected using an invisible line, it gives the audience a clear indication that there is human intervention. Let me show you how attuned you are and your eyes are to looking at invisible lines. What you see on your screen is a bunch of random rectangles. There's dispersed all over the slide randomly. Now I want you to answer for me a simple question. How many groups do you see? How many groups do you see here? 4. Ah, Toshita says 5. Lovely. A vast majority of you say 4. But if you do a little bit of an afterthought, you might say 5 as well. But intuitively, you all got to 4. Why? I'll answer that also in just a bit. Now, this is a slide that completely lacks alignment. This slide and the one that you're going to see in a few seconds are exactly the same. Exactly the same. Not one bit or byte of information has been removed. So let me tell you what are the dimensions where alignment has been applied. All the text and the visual elements, the box, are aligned to the left. So it's almost like a left margin. And we've replicated the same thing on the right as well. We've got a right margin. We've interestingly got margins that are relative to each other as well. So you'll see that the box on the left and the 3 boxes on the right are related to each other and they're aligned to the top and bottom of each other. So that's relative alignment, right? Of course, you see contrast and you see repetition, all the principles that we've talked about. You also have alignment where your eyes will notice it while you might not consciously be able to notice it. All the logos are also aligned along the middle. They're as much above the line as they are below it. And what's very interesting is PowerPoint is such a powerful tool, it allows you to do all of this in just 2 clicks. Even when alignment is not necessary, essential technically, your eyes still want it. Now, these are 2 charts that depict absolutely different things. They depict absolute numbers and proportions. However, you feel a sense of friction because they don't seem to be aligned at the bottom, because that's where your eyes are gliding over. However, just shifting it to the same level, we bring the x-axis of both the charts at the same level, and suddenly this slide looks much better. And guess what? We shift the legend to the middle, and we've got a slide that's perfectly aligned. So what does alignment help us do? If you ask most people about, Vasu, you could not have seen 9 groups, brother. We'll come to that in a bit, right? If you ask most people what good design is, they'll say design is layout. How objects are physically placed in a space. And that's exactly what alignment does. Alignment improves composition. So my only big piece of advice to you from this webinar today is, if you have only 5 minutes to clean up a slide, forget the colors, forget the fonts, forget the icons, align it well. Align all the objects to the left wherever necessary, all the objects to the right wherever necessary, center, middle, whatever is applicable. Do that level of alignment. Your audience will appreciate that effort. The last of the big 4 is proximity. Now, what's proximity? Items that are close to one another are, by nature of association of distance, assumed to be related to one another, right? And we saw that just a little while ago, where a vast majority of you said 4 rather than 5. And that's exactly what you'll do in the next slide. Now, if I ask you, what do you see first? Do you see rows or columns? Most of you are likely to say we see 4 rows of dots. And that's absolutely fine. But if I flip this over, now your brain tells you these aren't rows. These are 4 columns. It will take you a little bit of effort to actually count and figure out how many rows there are. So flip it back over and we've got rows and columns. So your brain is working to tell you that things that are close to one another are related to one another. Now that's why you've got to be very, very careful on how far or close you place objects on a slide. Now let's look at this one. Now we've got three circles at the top, 3 boxes at the bottom. Instantly your brain says the circles are close to the boxes. They seem to be aligned. There is definitely a relationship between them. Sadly, there isn't. So what do? We really create 2 different blocks on the slide and separate them. Why? Because the circles that you see on the top are related to one another, and the text that you see at the bottom in 3 different boxes are related to one another. So we create something like this. Now we've got this neat little diagram on the left, which connects the 3 concepts. and we've got the text on the right, which again, through contrast, as you can see, we've got the headers in a different font and a different color, and the subtext in a different font in a different color. However, we've also maintained the rigor of repetition. All the blue text, whether it's on the left or the right, is exactly the same size and the same color. And interestingly, it doesn't have a very healthy name, but it's a very healthy thing to have on a slide. That big band that you see in the middle, the space that separates the two, is actually called a gutter. So use the gutter to build a sense of proximity or distance of information blocks on your slide. And what does proximity help us do? It helps us understand how one piece of information is related to another piece of information on the slide, or is it even related at all? So these are the 4 rules that we call contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. And I'm sure you might not like it, but it's a memorable acronym to remember. These are the principles of crap. So if you don't crap your slides will look like crap. So that brings me to the end of my discussion with you. Of course, we'll use the rest of the time to get into a healthy discussion. But there were 2 very interesting slides I got, and I'm going to remake them for you using the principles that we've just discussed. So let's take them one by one. This is one of the slides that I received. Now, again, going back, I'm sure you can notice it, that from jumping from the previous slide to this one, you now see 2 black bands on either side of the slide, right? Let me go back to the slide that I will rework. You see these bands right here. Now, interestingly, this slide has been fashioned or created in an older version of the slide dimension, which is the 4:3 aspect ratio. Now, as a presenter, you're doing yourself a huge disservice by creating your slides in the 4:3 aspect ratio. Why? Let me show you. Let me shift this slide to the left. Now, both the black bands emerge on the right. Now, that's 25% the screen size. So, which means you're now using a 16:9 screen. And when you're creating a 4:3 slide, you're wasting away 25% of your slide. Please don't do that. It's just one click away, and I'd be happy to show you how that works. Let's come back to the slide. Now, as I could figure out that this slide has been really picked up from a training environment, and there are 7 myths around the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act that the presenter is trying to address. Now, there is a myth and there is the reality. Now, please understand that as a member of the audience, when you're paying attention or when you're talking or discussing the first point, the remaining 6 points on the slide are noise. They're impeding the discussion. Why? Some of your audience will get distracted and they'll start reading the text, which means when they're reading the text, they're not listening to the presenter, which essentially means that the presenter is going to cover each of these points one after the other. So it's a good idea to either animate them or not show them at all. However, your audiences hate bad surprises. They want to know how much content you're going to cover. Is it going to be 7 laws or 7 myths or 10 laws or 10 myths or 3 myths, whatever it is. So we'll give them that sense of anticipation, yet keep our slides visual and sparse. And we've built a case around it. So if I were to present this, I'm going to make this into these 7 myths that I'm going to talk about. And here comes the first myth. So we've got this 7 myths that we'll talk about. I'm going to set the context. Okay, let's attack them one by one. Then I'll go to the first one and I'll talk about this, engage in a discussion, then push it back to the placeholder and the third and the fourth and the fifth. So what I'm essentially doing is using animation. I am not allowing the audience to jump ahead of me in the story. Now they're all with me on the 5th point. Now I control when we jump to the 6th and how much time we spend on the 7th. But you've got to remember, your audiences lose their attention really quickly. So therefore, when you come back, you summarize them for your audience once more. So you started with an empty slide, which built anticipation that, now the presenter is going to talk about 7 points, and it's busting the myths because it is clearly a part of the title. And then we go to the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. and then we summarize it neatly. Now, if I were to send these slides over, I could just send the first slide and the last slide, and all the intervening animated slides could be stripped away from the document. It therefore then becomes a part of uh, the whole experience that the presenter is delivering. Remember, story, design, delivery. Let's now look at another slide. And uh, I saw Prashant in the room. So Prashant, specifically to you, I first looked at this slide and I tried to figure out what is this slide trying to say. And that's really where you should start when you are constructing your messaging. So I looked at 4 pieces of information that this slide is trying to communicate, right? Even though you see 5 blocks, there are 4 pieces of information. The first piece is the presenter is trying to talk about some personal information from his or her life. Then he is talking about his education and his experience. And then I see on the left side, there's a block that talks about the skills. And finally, the interests that this person has both inside and outside of the workplace. So I clearly got these 4 blocks of text. And Prashant is in the room. If I remember correctly, I saw him at the start. I mean, one of his responses. So that was the intent, Prashant, right? Give us a thumbs up. Perfect. Now, I'm a big Apple fanboy, right? I love everything Apple. I have all Apple products except the Vision Pro, but so I also lean to them for a lot of inspiration. They've created this so-called grid of uh, different dimensions of text. They call it the bento style. Now, the bento style has everything that we talked about. It's got contrast because there are images right here. It's got text. It's got a combination of text and images. So the the slide that Prashant sent us is a perfect candidate to be used to be recast using the bento style. So what is the first thing I did? I created a grid of 20 blocks on the slide, right? And then of course merged and fused a few to come up with something that looked like this. So we've got Prashant's definition of who he is right now. So we've got his designation, and you see there's a contrast between his designation and his name. And there are some amazing adjectives that define him. That's right there. There were 4 pictures of Prashant in the initial deck. I kind of took the sort of the mugshot away because I thought the other 3 images were far more compelling and engaging than the mugshot. And then we've got his education, and right adjacent to the education is his. So it's almost like a visual evidence to the fact that I am a gold medalist, and it's right there. And then we've got his experience, and we've again made that visual by adding the logos of the companies. And there was a specific, so I'm assuming that Prashant's using this for an international audience. So he qualified SR as an Indian conglomerate, which is highlighted right there. And there are skills and professional interests. And of course, there are interests outside of the office. And now, because it's a grid or what we call the bento style, we have this capability or the possibility of moving around the grids. So, we can move his picture to the left to create a balance of 2 pictures to the left, 2 pictures to the right, 1 to the left, and we can balance in whatever form and fashion we want. And because I had a little extra time, I then added these nice little icons to contrast the headers from the key points. Now, interestingly, you will note that the headers are not as large as the components inside. That's because I don't want the audience to focus on what the header is. I want the audience to focus on what are my interests, what are my skills. Therefore, usually you will see that the header or skills will be larger than the skills listed below. But the intent of this slide is that my skills shine over than the word skills. So we've added that icon. Now this looks perfect because it's got a sense of balance, it's got contrast, it's got repetition, it's got alignment, and most importantly, it's got proximity. And that really brings me to the end of my conversation, and really like to make it truly a conversation after this. I'm open to any questions or maybe giving you a live demo, if you will, on a slide that you want me to kind of recast. But before I kind of hand over the baton to all of you, I have a question that I need to ask you. All right. There's just a couple of slides that I have beyond this. So we started at 3:03, and the time by my watch is 4:08. All right. So I'm not gas bagging. You can see the watch. It says 4:08. So I've really spoken for an hour and 5 minutes, which is 65 minutes. All right. What I really want to ask you is, in the last 65 minutes that I've had this conversation with you, and remember, there were times when I was doing less talking and I was reading all the messages that you had. How many slides do you think I've used? Ankita says 100 plus. Ankita, it's cheating, so you've been in a session before, you know it. But let others also guess it. Thank you for sharing. Truly at a loss of words. Oh, thank you so much, Prashant. Manjunath says 5. Sridharm says 25 plus. So 25 plus, how much, Sridhar? At least 50, but it looks like 6 or 7. Okay, maybe 50 in total. And I'm going to stop the slideshow mode. When they say, and this is especially what my mom told me, when you have really audacious things to talk about, uh, you must show it to people rather than tell them. So I'm going to kind of share or bring my slide deck to the top of your screen. I'd really urge you to pay a little bit of focus and read around the cursor. What's the number you can see around the cursor? Yes. So Prashant's bento style slide was 147th. And interestingly, if you'll notice, there are 4 blocks on his original slide. So there were 4 different animations on the same slide, which means I've clicked my clicker over 200 times in the last 1 hour to keep you all engaged. No, Sridhar, it doesn't include the animation. That's why on the Prashant slide where I had the boxes come on top, there was one slide with 4 different pieces of animation. So it was one slide and 4. So 147 slides. You've seen 147 slides in the last 70 minutes. So what's the big takeaway? The big takeaway is people don't care. They don't care about the number of slides. They don't care about how your slides are animated. They care about an engaging story. And it's so counterintuitive that we forget. Let's take the myth, busting the myth slide. All right, let's go back to that slide. Now, whoever is presenting it is going to present 7 points. Let's assume for a minute that each point is discussed for 2 minutes. This slide will last on the screen for 14 minutes. Am I right in that calculation? Yes or no? 7 points, 2 minutes a point, 14 points. What have I done? I've broken the 7 points into 7 different slides. And that's exactly what you saw. All right? We've got 7 different slides here, actually 9, because there's a introductory context setting slide, which of course the presenter will do, except that the text is written. And there's a summary slide, which the presenter did not use. Each of these slides will now only last for 2 minutes. There's motion, which shows sense of connectivity. The slides are changing faster. However, the time that I engage with my audience continues to be 14 minutes. It's therefore not the number of slides. Then what is it? Why do your managers or your stakeholders say this, oh man, bring only 3 slides? The reason that they say this is that they want you to finish in time. Therefore, next time when somebody says, bring 3 slides, your instant question to that person should be, how much time do I have? If they say 7 minutes, try and wrap up in 5. If they say 90 minutes, try and wrap up in 75, 80. And remember, your audience will run out of their ability to listen to you before you run out of your ability to speak. So therefore, stop speaking before they stop listening. And most importantly, a presentation is not about completeness. It's about clarity. I talked to you about 4 principles of design: contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. CRAP, as we like to call it. Are they all the principles? Absolutely not. But for the time available, for me to give you maximum value, These four were more than enough. And all the slide transformations that you saw, this slide, by the way, has 4 different clicks. So there comes a slide, click number 1, same slide, click number 2, same slide, click number 3, click number 4, same slide. So I clicked more than 200 times, by the way. Coming back, your audience expects clarity. Therefore, please focus on the story. And like I said, I will repeat ad nauseum, your audience doesn't care who you are. They only care about what's in it for me. So they're extremely selfish and fairly forgiving as well. I'm sure you will forgive me for the fact that you couldn't hear the audio from Matthew McConaughey's video, but please remember to go back and watch it. You will love it. All right. So on that note, let me quickly summarize for you what are the big 3 takeaways from our discussion today. Number 1, we talked about what's wrong with presentations. What's really wrong is that we're suffering from death by ignorance, not death by PowerPoint. I love PowerPoint as a software. It is brilliant. It can do wonders. It can make you almost like a rock star. We are ignorant of the rules that govern effective speaking. We are ignorant of the rules of good slide design. We are ignorant of how people engage with us, even when that engagement is partially constrained, like it is in our environment today. And these are constraints that we have to learn to live with. So you've got to get to understanding the fundamentals. Fundamentals of communication, fundamentals of the software. Uh, I think many of us who've been using PowerPoint for over a decade haven't really had formal education when it comes to learning the software. So spend a little bit of time and effort in figuring out how these transitions, how these animations work. Second, your slides are not your presentation. You are the presentation. I am the presentation here. If I hand over this deck to you, to any one of you, right? I can see Kavita, Leena, Sarvani, Chen, all on the call here. If I hand the deck to you, you will not be able to deliver the same experience that I have been. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse. Therefore, you are the presentation and the slides are your slide kick. Therefore, please stop referring to your PowerPoint deck as the presentation. Call it what it is. It is a slide deck. And last but not the least, remember to crap your slides. If you don't crap your slides will look like crap. Of course, we have 15 minutes for a discussion right now in case you have any questions. If not, we'll obviously end before time. This is where you can continue the conversation with me. Uh, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not as active on Instagram and X, but if you drop me a message, I will definitely revert to you. And right on the top is my email. If you have anything else that you'd like to know, I'm happy to answer questions. And of course, I'd love to keep the conversation going beyond the 90 minutes that we've spent together. Sridharam has a question. We saw that there were several fonts used in the presentation deck. However, how do we decide which fonts to be used? Excellent question, Sridharam. A very simple answer to that question. In your own slide deck, you should not use more than 2 fonts. One is the primary font. So for our slides, we use only 2 fonts. We use a very versatile family called Syra. Uh, we also, in some cases, use another versatile family called Fira. Both of them are Google fonts. They're available for free download from fonts.google.com. And there's another one, which is a handwritten font that we use, which you would have seen when I said, what are your challenges, or if there is any challenge that you want me to talk about. This is a font, again, a free font called Good Dog Cool. So you saw the word challenge. It's almost like, I've struck off the word expectation and I'm penned challenge down. So these are the 2 fonts used. For the examples that I showed you, we were using the fonts that the client uses. So we use only 2 fonts, Syra and the Syra family and Good Dog. Any more questions before I hand over back to the edForce folks? Can't find me on LinkedIn? Leena, just go to Mohit Chhabra. You will see this bearded old man right there. Don't go by the edForce picture because they've seemed to use AI to make me look younger and more handsome. So just linkedin.in, linkedin.com/in/Mohit Chhabra without a space or an underscore. And that's me. Yes. Thank you, edTalks. Okay, please spell it here. Okay, edTalk's done that for me. I find it difficult to manage animations. Any tips on that? Chen, remember, animations and transitions are like spices. All right. Uh, they serve exactly the same purpose that spices serve in food. As long as they add meaning to your deck, please use them. All right. Too many of it will spoil the party. Too few will also, like lack of spices makes the food bland, will make your uh, presentation soulless. So how do we figure out when to use? Animations should not allow or should be your tool to not allow your audience to get ahead of you, which means they should read or see on the slide only what you're talking about. Therefore, I hate the use of the word animations. The right word is progressive disclosure. As the narration of my story is moving forward, the animation allows me to move my slides with that story. I'll show you an example, a very simple example of what I mean. You remember we talked about the presentation ecosystem, right? So here we've got conference room. Now, I don't want you to read what the next room is. So therefore, I've animated it and this becomes boardroom. This is a single slide. Now, to ensure that the sense of connectivity is not lost, I take them to the previous slide and one by one animate the three characteristics I'm talking about. Then I converge them again back to show you that there are some rooms which have characteristics of both the boardroom and the classroom, the boardroom and the conference room. And now you're familiar with the word board and conference rooms. Therefore, I'm happy to remove the text and just put classroom at the top. So progressive disclosure. I will disclose the information to my audience as my story progresses. Make sense? Please suggest some learning platforms to make good slide decks. So Sarvani, very soon, this is something I've been trying to do for the last 1 year. Very soon I'll be on YouTube. I'll be giving very practical corporate PowerPoint presentation tutorials, unlike the ones which focus completely on decoration. Hopefully we should be going live in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So that's the one platform I would strongly recommend. However, there aren't good video resources right now, but there are some amazing books that you could follow. The one book that I would strongly recommend for amazing slide design is a book called Presentation Zen by a gentleman called Gar Reynolds. The second is a book called Slideology by a lady called Nancy Duarte. These are the go-to resources for amazing slide design. So these are the two places you could go to. And very soon, I will, in the next webinar, hopefully add a third resource, which is a book that I'm writing, which is called Freedom from Ugly Slides. That's completely going to be focused on the question that you're answering. So as of now, you have only 2 resources, but hopefully by the end of the year, you will have 3. Can you write the name of the books? Absolutely. The first one is called Presentation Zen by a gentleman called Gar Reynolds, and the next one is called Slideology by a lady called Nancy Duarte. Is that fine, Prakash? Perfect. I think I'm done with my time. Over to you, edForce folks. What is your suggestion on classroom, conference room, boardroom, as it is the most effective to apply the KISS principle while creating PPT? Vasu, this is very well said. KISS always works. But we think of KISS as not KISS, but 3 S's. Whether it's a classroom, conference room, or a boardroom, for you to really, because KISS, I think, is a little incomplete. Some topics, by the nature of how they cannot be short, right? So if you really want to learn effective slide design, you cannot have a short topic. So while you know CRAP works, honestly, it will be very difficult for you to apply the principles unless you also know how PowerPoint works. So for you to internalize CRAP, you will also need to learn PowerPoint, which is a long, complex process. So some subjects, quantum physics, by their nature, are complex. So short always doesn't work. Therefore, the three principles that we prefer are simplicity, I talked about it, specificity, I mentioned it sparingly, and structure. If you have these three principles, you can adapt these three principles for any environment that you're attacking, whether it is a conference room, a boardroom, or a classroom. And irrespective of the clients that we engage with or the workshops that we conduct, these principles shine out always. They are the building blocks of whatever we do. Is using AI to make PPTs a new norm nowadays? Varun, it's overhyped right now, if you ask me honestly. It's almost like fashionable. Uh, the grunt work can be done by AI. However, the thinking has to come from you. Remember three pieces that make an impactful presentation: story, design, and delivery. Story will continue to be yours because the story has to be adapted to the needs of the audience. The slide design is something where AI will help tremendously. The delivery is something that you will have to do. AI still continues to lack empathy. As humans, we have a lot of it. So do not delegate story and delivery to AI. Design, take as much help. I also take a lot of help from AI. The one platform that I love to use, sometimes just to ideate, is a platform called napkin.ai. It's a great way for you to create visuals from concepts. Is okay. So I'm so happy I was tagged on your LinkedIn post to be here. Thank you, Chen. That's so sweet of you. Uh, I tried Canva for this, but it still had to. Absolutely, Chen. Doesn't work. Doesn't work at all. So you need that clarity, and once that clarity is there, AI can then help you. Perfect. On that note, I can go on and on when it comes to effective public speaking and presentations, but we have a time limit and I definitely don't want to breach that. So if you have any questions, just write me an email or tag me on LinkedIn. I'm fairly quick when it comes to responding to emails and on LinkedIn. edForce folks, Guncha, Ashutosh, over to you.
Yes, I'm here, Mohit.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Mohit. Yes. So I know these questions and answers will never end. So as you suggested, maybe everybody could reach out to you on your email ID. They could write to us, or they could just leave a message for you on the LinkedIn, and you would be able to help them out. Having said that, if you remember, I spoke in the starting of the session that there is thrilling Amazon voucher if you stay with us till the end. So lucky people who ever stay till the end, just three quick steps: leave us a Google review, follow on all the three platforms mentioned here: Facebook, Insta, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Sorry, that was four. uh, Once you have done that, send a screenshot to my colleague and my friend Ashutosh on his email ID that's mentioned on the slide here, and we will send you the voucher directly in your inbox from where you have given the review. Please don't try to do it twice. Okay. Now, I would just like to conclude the session with a thank you note for you, Mohit. Thank you for these incredible life transformations and, for sharing the principles, the techniques that have actually made these slides very, very persuasive. And I would also like to thank all the attendees who I hope enjoyed seeing these decks, reimagined. And I hope they picked up some actionables and they can put it into practice immediately. I would love to see all of them in the next Ed Talk that we are going to schedule next month. The details would be out on our LinkedIn page shortly. Stay tuned, stay inspired, and keep persuading. Thank you once again, Mohit, and thank you
Thank you.
everybody
Thank you so
for your
much.
time.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.